Hello everyone, happy Wednesday. Come on in and join me for another inspired fireside chat. Today we have with us Christa Janine, and we will be talking about yoga and social justice, and especially with events that happened last week in Minnesota, Minneapolis is the perfect subject to talk about. My name is Paola Shah. I am the founder and CEO of Tockets. Tockets are high-performance grip socks that enhance the foot-brain connection and give you confidence to step in any barefoot activity. And remember, our mission is to elevate you through your feet. I'm inviting Christa. Okay. Oops. Something happened. Let's see. Let's send request again. I think Christa is. I see her here.
Hi.
Hey, Christa. How are
Hi.
you?
Good. How are you?
Very, very good. Happy to be with you today here.
Hello. Yes, I'm happy to be here as well. Let me scoot back a little. I'm really close to the camera.
Yes, so we can see better your face. I wonder. Yeah,
There we go.
I know.
Yeah.
Like Instagram changed the settings, and every time I have
Yeah.
to.
Every time you have to readjust and you think it's at the right height, and I'm also used to being on the top and not on the bottom. So then
Yeah. So, Christa, again, thank you so much for being with us today and for accepting our invitation. And I'm really looking forward to this chat, especially given the
yeah, no,
social
absolutely.
context. And then, so I always ask my guests to introduce themselves because I don't want to miss absolutely anything important. So, who is Christa today?
Yeah, so I am Christa Janine. I'm based out of Los Angeles, California. I am a wellness professional, so I have my own life coaching business, and I also have my own virtual studio. And right now, a lot of what my time and energy has been focused on is helping people understand the core principles of yoga philosophy, and how they directly intersect with social justice and like the fight for social change and activism. So a lot of my workshops and a lot of the in-person events I'm doing and live like webinars are really centered around yoga philosophy and social justice.
Great. And then we will dive really deep on this subject that is it's very important, especially now.
Yeah.
And then, so Christa, before going there, could you please share with us what were you doing before yoga
Yeah.
and
So
being in the fitness industry?
so I've actually been in the yoga and fitness space since 2012, so almost a decade now. But I've also worked in television. So my like formal education is in production and journalism. So I spent about a decade or so in that arena as well. But recently during the pandemic, I sort of like had this come to Jesus moment, if you will, and really just started to focus in on my entrepreneurship. And like I've always felt a desire to have my own company, to do my own thing, and to create like a work culture that I would want to work in, because I couldn't find it in the industry I was in. So that's kind of how I steered over to doing like health and wellness full time. And I still do production on the back end because I have to like edit my own stuff and, do my own marketing and that sort of thing. But that's what I was doing for 10 years. I've lived in Chicago, I've lived in New York. Like I said, I'm out in LA now, all for like work and production work. But I've kind of focused more on just using my talents to make the world a better place, for lack of a better term, and just like making people more aware and more enlightened with the world we live in, And I think a lot of people have been living in the dark for a very long time. So this is definitely an era and a space and time where we can all be a little more conscious of the things that are happening around us. And I'm just happy I get to hold space for people like while they're doing that soul searching.
And then, so Krista, I believe shifts happen because there is some type of discomfort. There is some events in our life that kind of pushes to make those shifts.
Yeah.
At some point, we say enough is enough.
Yeah.
What was that for you?
So it's so interesting because my last position was at Snapchat. Last June, my contract ended. And it's so funny because, like, if we're talking about like jobs, like this was the best job I've ever had, right? Like my boss was great. I had the creative freedom to do whatever I wanted to, give or take. And I was really in a space where it's like this is as good as it's gonna get in the field that I'm in. And I still wasn't happy. I still wasn't fulfilled in what I was doing. Even though I was doing great work and we were telling amazing stories, I still didn't quite feel like it was right. And I was like, if this doesn't feel right, if like this ideal situation doesn't feel right, nothing is ever going to feel right. And I think that was a moment where I knew it was time for me to just work for myself full time and really follow my passion and my purpose down that route, which I'm sure will swing me back around to production eventually. But I've always wanted to have my own production company anyway. So I think it was just a domino effect with everything, with the pandemic, with the fact that I didn't necessarily feel fulfilled in my job, not because my job wasn't great, it was a great job, but just because it just wasn't what I was supposed to be doing, and just
So,
coming to those realizations.
so what are you supposed to be doing?
Right. So what's crazy is I truly believe like I'm supposed to be an entrepreneur and have always been. Even when I was younger, right? I always had some side hustle I was doing, some stream of revenue I was bringing in myself, like from the time I was 10 on, and that's just been in me and who I am. But then also I have this ability to hold space for people and make them feel really comfortable dealing with very uncomfortable topics and subjects, or even just making them feel comfortable enough to trust themselves to do things that they don't necessarily think that they would have the capacity to do. So that's like the space. I'm blessed with the gift of helping people feel empowered and safe enough to like test their boundaries. And that's what I'm doing every day, whether it's through teaching yoga or doing these workshops or even having conversations with my friends. It's like I'm I'm able to create space for people to grow. And I think that in itself is like a gift all its own.
So let's talk about social justice and yoga. Why did you decide that to be the focus? Because it's yoga is a very
Yeah.
open, all inclusive
Yeah.
practice, and then sure it has been westernized, and
Mhm.
then the reality is that actually it turns out that not always is that inclusive, not always is that open. When we cannot identify with the people that are teaching or leading during yoga workshop, etc., we feel like we just don't belong, right?
Yeah.
So um,
And I think, and just to your point, yoga in itself is very inclusive. Like the
mhm,
origins of yoga is a
mhm,
very inclusive practice. I mean, yoga in itself means to unite. Like that's
right.
what the word yoga
Mhm.
means. So I think what has happened with so many other aspects of other cultures is that the Western society has culturally appropriated them, right? And taken what they thought was most beneficial from that culture and from that environment and changed it into something that it was never intended to be, right? Because even if you look at the origins of yoga and you really sit down and look at like how yoga started, the first posture in yoga is like sitting, right? It's not standing on your head, it's not warrior two, any of that. It's all about finding your connection to your mind and body and spirit and being one with yourself. The only reason why asanas were introduced is because the monks were trying to get the little boys that they were trying to teach how to meditate, they had to get their energy out somehow. And that's where the physical practice came from. But and I mean, and this is just goes in line with the social justice aspect of things because white supremacy is so embedded in our culture. Everything that is a mainstream aspect of our culture is very whitewashed, it's very vanilla, and it's intended to be so because that is who the mainstream caters to. So even if you look at yoga, it's for thin white women who are like between 20 and like 35, maybe 40. You know what I mean? It's not this all inclusive thing that it was meant to be because in our Western society, we are led to believe that mainstream equals white. and that unless you are white, then you're not invited into this space. And if you are going to come into this space, then you need to assimilate into what this space and what this culture means to us. You know what I mean? So I think that's where the social justice starts to come in, is because you have people who think that they're practicing yoga and they're doing all the things that they're supposed to be doing and they're being inclusive, and like, oh, well, people of color just don't like yoga, or oh, people who are older don't have like the flexibility, or they aren't able-bodied enough to do yoga, or you know what I mean? There's all these excuses that the industry has made over the years, when the actuality is you haven't made it accessible to these demographics. Like, you know what I mean? You've put your yoga studios in very specific locations in white suburbia or in upper Manhattan. You know what I mean? It's like you're not putting it in areas where this demographic would populate frequently, So we really have to think about how we're even marketing yoga and where we're looking to do yoga, because it is very much so catered to like your white suburban mom, for lack of a better term, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really where it all kind of stemmed from.
And actually, what you're mentioning is not far off what happens in other industries. It doesn't have to be only the fitness industry, right?
Yep.
Like, I believe that probably you experienced the same while you were working for TV, the big shows, where you're able to climb the ladder as, other people that are white did it.
No, and absolutely. And I think that goes right back to the point where it's like, if you do want to grow and progress in these industries, whether it's television, whether it's fitness, whatever it is, if it's a corporate entity, and like, let's just be very frank, you're either told as a woman of color, right, that you need to act this way, you need to change your behavior, you need to do this, you need to do that. That's very much so whitewashing who you are and making you very like stale and vanilla, and it's not bringing the aspects to whatever you're doing. It's not making it as great as it could be, because you're losing a part of yourself. And I think especially in creative spaces, what makes us so valuable is our experiences, right? Whether it's in yoga, whether it's in television, whether even it's as a creative on these platforms, our unique experiences is what makes people want to follow us and want to listen to what we're saying and want to hear the stories that we're telling. So I think by doing that, by making everybody kind of like assimilate and be this like melting pot, it's taking away people's character. It's taking away the uniqueness that makes everybody who they're supposed to be, and actually adds value. Like, our uniqueness is only going to add value to whatever space we're in.
Right. And then I guess, especially being in television, right? Being a woman is already difficult. We went in a color, and then we being a woman in a large body.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that experience, or how is that experience for you? And then when you left, or during your yoga as fitness practice, because I know you practice many other different types of things. How all of that has been, and I'm asking this question because for me it has been an eye-opening doing these interviews and interviewing people that completely different background, race, size, etc.
Absolutely.
It's how we hold these stereotypes that have been ingrained in society, and they pass from one generation to the other, and even unconsciously, like we do pass them to our kids.
Absolutely.
In a unconscious way. So how do we break all those stereotypes from your point of view?
Yeah.
The one that is viewing us here, the ones that are going to view this chat in the future,
I think it goes back to representation, and really representation matters, because I think for so long, especially because I've played sports my entire life. Like, from the time I was like 4, I've been actively involved in sports and fitness. And it always comes down to people underestimating you because you are in a larger body. So they don't expect you to be fast. They don't expect you to be agile. They don't expect you to have endurance. You know what I mean? So it's just constantly breaking down those stereotypes and making people understand, like, yeah, I'm powerful, and yes, I'm like fast, and yes, I have endurance, and I can do all the things that people probably half my size probably can't do, because of their body type, right? And it's a lot of it goes back to like this concept of like what is an athletic build, or this concept of like the BMI chart. All of these things were created in order to keep disenfranchised demographics in their place, right? It was to keep them down. It was to keep them under control. It was to make them not feel as though they could do X, Y, and Z. But if you really dig into like why Black women have larger legs or like larger bottoms, it's because of slavery, right? And it goes into epigenetics. And not to like go off in the weeds, but as humans, our instinct is to survive. So if you know that you're in an environment that's going to force you to need more muscle mass, right, then your offsprings are going to be more muscularly defined. And this is passed on from generation to generation. And anybody who studies epigenetics understands like how this forms, right? So if you really go into why like Black women have bigger bodies, a lot of it does stem from slavery and having to survive. But now in the society we live in, you know, it's like, well, yeah, we are strong. We can lift very heavy things. We are agile. We are fast because we have had to endure all of this for generations. And now instead of having to work in like cotton fields, you know, we're athletes, or we're doing other things where we're physically using our bodies on a regular basis. But because society has taught us that you need to be slim and have a six pack and like all these things, which I mean, even a six pack doesn't actually mean you're strong. Those are like superficial muscles. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you really dig into the muscle, like construction of the body, the six pack is like just pretty. It doesn't do anything for you, you know? So I think it's like unlearning all of these things that we've been told were the appropriate things for us to look like in order to actually be fit, right? Even this concept of like obese. It's like, it's funny because my father was in the military for 27 years and he was always overweight based on like the BMI chart, right? So he would have for his PT test, which is like their physical training test or whatever, because he was so like built, like he was just strong, right? And it just goes back to the fact that like this man is healthy. He was in the prime of his life, like, you know what I mean? Like, yes, technically he's overweight, but if you look at him, it's like solid muscle. He had like, you know, maybe 2 to 5% body fat. So it's like we really have to reconstruct how we're thinking about things and experiencing things, because it's not a way to gauge somebody's health, you know? So that's like the thing that I think we're all starting to relearn and to restructure, because like I was saying, like there's certain things that I can do in my body just because of how my body is set up, and because I have been playing sports my entire life, that some people it would take them a lot of mental capacity and coordination to do the things that I'm doing, and it's second nature for me because my body is used to it, you know? So, and it's showing up in these spaces and like doing the things and showing people that it's possible to do the things, right? And I think that's a big part of what I do. And like, that's a big part of how I empower people, is because I am showing them, you can do this too. My body looks like your body. I'm weighing in probably about like at 235 right now, because I just, you know, pandemic has gotten us all. But I'm still working out and still doing stuff. But if you think like 235, you know, people are gonna be like, oh my God, you're obese, you're overweight, you're not in shape, you're not healthy. I've never had a bad physical in my life, like ever. My cholesterol is normal, my, you know, blood pressure is normal, like all the things that you would consider unhealthy. And it just goes to show like that number on the scale, which we all talk about so often, is so irrelevant most of the time. And like we're all chasing a number on that scale, but it's like, how relevant is this number really?
Yeah, and that kind of what you were saying remind me of my conversation with Natalie Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
She teaches bar, and she has a large body. And then I remember when I was doing my research, you know, before our interview, and looking at her feed, and then I started looking at those comments of people that were saying, you are promoting obesity. So basically saying, you know, because you have a large body, you shouldn't be teaching a fitness class, right?
Right.
And then I asked the question, and her answer was very clever, and it's like, I'm promoting movement.
Right.
Right? And then we go back to the importance of identifying ourselves with the person that we're following because of a fitness class, following because of the values that we believe, whatever. But we need to identify. So I it's really sad how we grow with the six pack,
Yeah.
with the perfect, body
Yeah.
measurements that actually are reality. They don't matter. They're
Yeah. And I mean, and even if you look at like some of these like super strong fit people, right? It's like their flexibility isn't that great. Like dudes who are super jacked and like have like all of this muscle mass, they don't have any mobility. You know what I mean? So it's like how healthy are you if you don't have any mobility in your body, right? Your joints need to be able to move and function properly. If you're only working on building muscle, you're not doing your body a good service. Because, and I mean, studies have shown the more flexible you are, the stronger you'll be in the gym because you have more movement, right? You're more mobile. You can lift heavier. You can do other things. So I think, and I mean, and we're slowly getting there. And I will say this, just letting go of this like false narrative that fit looks a certain way, right? That athletic is a body type. It's
right.
not. It's not. Like athletic is not a body type. And I think the more we do see people in these spaces that are larger bodies doing all the things that people
Mm-hmm.
half their size are doing, right? And more companies like Aloe and Lululemon and all of like the major brands who are in these spaces creating fitness attire create clothing for people who are bigger bodies, right? The more we'll all start to normalize this. And I think that's really what it boils down to, is like it has to be a collective movement for everybody to say, okay, this is what healthy actually looks like, right? And this is what endurance looks like, and this is what strength looks like, and flexibility, and so on and so forth. It has to be a collective conversation because we're so like distorted in the way we view fitness, and it really is more about the superficial like aspects of what fit looks like, as opposed to like actually being healthy and moving your body. you know
Right. And then going back to race and bodies. I so I moved from, well, Colombia to Europe, and then here
yeah.
to from Europe to the US. And then New York, I used to live in New York. So New York is a place with all mix. You see a bit of
Hmm.
everything. There isn't, to be honest, it's kind of, well, we're all together here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then I moved to Colorado. And
Yeah.
that for me has been a totally different experience. So imagine like if I was going to be a studio owner of Pilates, bar, yoga in Colorado, in Boulder,
Hmm.
right, or Longmont, where the Black population is really, really small.
Hmm.
Um, there is the bigger like Mexican population, Hispanics, and of course
Hmm.
Caucasians. But so if I wanted to take a workshop with you because I
Hmm.
want to bring social justice and to transmit something to my students beyond of shape your body or lose your weight,
Hmm.
etc. Uh, what can I do in that context? In the context
Yeah.
where there is you grew up like that. You grew up like
Yeah.
in this way, and then so there isn't a mix. But I want
Yeah.
to do something.
And I love this question because I get it a lot in my workshops, right? It's like, oh, well, I live somewhere that's like super homogenous, and like this is just like we don't have a diverse population.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the beauty of the world we live in is that we have social media. So we have things like this where you can still interact with people that you're not culturally, aligned with, right? That you don't see day to day on a basis, but you can still interact with them and get to know them. You can still understand how social justice impacts where you live. We can all do history on our own like cities and states and understand, well, why is this state so white? You know what I mean? Why is this city so white? Because 9 times out of 10, if it is that way, there is a historic moment in time where diverse people were pushed out and white people were told that you can come here and be safe and like you won't have to deal with diversity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are all moments of education that we can teach our kids that should be implemented in our school systems, right? Because as diverse as America is, the fact that there are areas that are so white, it is because of racism, whether we want to admit it or not. And these places were set up as safe havens, if you will, for white populations. And it's like, okay, so I'm here. I didn't choose to be here. This is where my parents like brought me to live, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it's like you have to take those moments to do that self-study. Read books about it. Watch documentaries about it. There's so much information out there right now at our fingertips that there's no reason for us to say, well, I didn't know, or I thought racism was ended, or I didn't, you know what I mean? It's like
Mm-hmm.
you're not living in a bubble anymore. You have the whole world at your fingertips, and you really can still be politically involved and active, even if you live in a very homogenous state. You can, because we live in America, and there are things that go beyond just your borders, right? And I think the more we start to really think about the US as the continental US, you know what I mean? And understanding what's happening in Minnesota is still going to impact Colorado, whether you like it or
Mm-hmm.
not. You know what I mean? It's like you have to be a global, oh, well, that's them over there. I don't do that. We're progressive. Because it's like, are you progressive? Like, if somebody was in your state, in your space right now, and this happened to them, like, what would you do? And I think people aren't asking themselves those questions, right? Because they don't have to. And that in itself is a privilege. And that's a white privilege that I don't think a lot of people really sit in that often, right? Is the fact that you don't have to ask yourself this question is a privilege. That you don't have to worry about your kids getting stopped by the police, right? Because you can't tell me that these white kids in suburbia aren't doing drugs, right? They aren't. Like, if they were, and you know what? And a New
They
York police
carry
officer,
guns.
yeah,
Especially in
they
a
do.
state like Colorado, right?
Yeah, they do whatever they want. But a New York police officer, during like the height of stop and frisk, he was like, you know what? If we stopped white kids as much as we stop black kids, we would find harder drugs on them than we do these black and brown kids in the Bronx and Brooklyn. But you're telling us that we have to stop these kids when they have like an ounce of weed. And then, you know, now they're going to jail. They have a record. But if you go to the Upper West Side, you're going to find more than some weed in these kids' book bags. So it's all of that. You know what I mean? It's that
Mm-hmm.
whole, like, it's everybody taking that bird's eye view and not just staying in their little bubble, right? Because I'm not going to act like there aren't places where, yeah, you probably aren't going to find any black people or brown people or anyone that isn't white. But at the same time, you have literally the whole world at your fingertips. If you want to actively make a change, you can.
Yeah, and it's funny because the first time I heard the concept of brown, like to be honest, I lived in Europe for 10 years. I never ever had a conversation with people who were mentioning my skin color,
Yeah.
ever, right? In New York, ever. But then I moved here, and then my daughter got her brown comment, right? Like
Yeah.
and then she pointed out straight away. She told the girl that you're being racist, right?
Yeah.
And my husband is asked, "Do you play another, other white sport apart from tennis?"
Yeah.
My husband is like, "What?" Like,
right. What does that mean? You should ask, what do you mean?
right?
Like,
What?
but I think it's beautiful your daughter has the words to be like, you know, you're discriminating against me right now, like you're being racist. Like, what does my skin tone have to do with anything that we're doing right now?
Right, and I think the school, like to be honest, her school has done a great job at, openly
Mm-hmm.
talking about those
Yeah.
topics and also how to approach them when
Yeah.
they come. But I guess it's part of the world that we live in today,
Mm-hmm.
especially here in the U.S., right? Like
Yeah.
you have to talk about the color of your skin when you shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to do Kilimanjaro
Mm-hmm.
in June, and I'm
That's
traveling.
exciting.
Yeah, and then I'm traveling with a group all black women. I'm the only brown. And then I received a call from this friend, and then she said, "Paula, I just want to make sure that you are aware that we're all black."
Right.
And then I'm like, "Yeah," and
She said yes.
what? But then that question is staying in my head, and I was like, would someone white will call me to say, "Hey, I want to make sure that you are all
Mm-hmm.
right"? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
this is how things are so bad, because you
Yeah.
have to warn people that, hey, you're going with this group of people with this color skin, right? Like,
Yeah.
and to me, is to be honest, is it's a bit sad that we get to that point to
Yeah.
warn others,
Yeah, and I think
right?
it just goes to show, like, once again, that privilege, right? Like you said, if it was a group of all white women that you were going with, nobody would even think to say, "Oh, by the way, like, we're all gonna be white on this trip. Like, are you comfortable with that?" But I think because specifically with Black women, I think because we have been pushed so far to the outskirts of society, unless somebody needs something from us, right? If people need things from us, then it's great, it's wonderful. Oh my God, you're super women. But then every other time it's like, oh, you guys are horrible and like you're aggressive and yada yada yada, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's just a precaution that you give because you don't want people to feel uncomfortable and you don't want anybody to be afraid of being in your space. So I think that's why those things happen. But you're right. It's sad, but I think everybody just wants to be safe and like everybody wants people to be comfortable, right? If you have been in that space where you are the only one of one race, right? Or one ethnic background or one cultural experience, you know what it feels like to be the odd man out and you don't want anybody else to feel that way. So you just want to make sure they're okay. And I think that's more so what it stems from is a place of like empathy that doesn't always have to show up in white spaces, right? Because even the concept of white, like you said, you lived in Europe, white is a very American concept. Like this concept of being white, like white isn't, there's not a white culture, white is not an ethnic group, it's white. Like it doesn't even, and people are like, oh, well, Black people get to be Black. Well, yes, but Black people have Black culture because African slaves were stripped from their culture and had to create their own culture in America. That's why there's Black culture. Whiteness does not have to exist, it only exists to oppress others, you know?
Right, right, right.
So, but I say all that to say that's probably why she called and was like, "Are you okay with this?" You know?
Yeah, but to me, it's just how broken the society is.
Yeah,
When we have to, and I mean, I understand where it came from, and
yeah,
I don't judge that
yeah,
that fact, but it shows how broken
yeah,
we are. As a
yeah,
society, that we need to like tell
yeah,
people, like, make
yeah,
sure, and it's as you said, it's a way to actually to protect yourself more than
yeah.
anything else, right? Like,
Absolutely. And I think we're so splintered as a society, and it's just becoming more and more evident because people are just like, now they're just being like blatantly ignoring things. And I think we talk about police brutality and like the the defunding of the police specifically, but then also the fact that police officers are trained very specifically to treat Black and brown people away, right? And this training is like honestly across the US. We can't just pinpoint it to one area. We would all love to. And a lot of people, because I grew up in the South, it's like, oh, it's way worse in the South. It's like, no, it's just more covert in other places. At least it used to be, and now it's blatant because thank God for like video cameras. But I think what we're seeing now is people understanding the systemic aspects of it and that we all have to collectively come together for this change to happen because otherwise it's not going to happen. And I think a lot of the work I do is empowering people to say, okay, this is my lived experience, this is where I'm coming from, and this is how I can help. Because so often I have white women reaching out to me and they're like, oh, well, I'm just like a white woman and I don't want to overstep my bounds and I don't want to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm just like, do something. You can't just sit back and make that your excuse anymore. If you don't know what to do, say, I don't know what to do, and then start doing your own research to figure out what to do, right? If you don't know what to do, if you don't feel confident about what you're doing, do it anyway, and somebody's going to correct you, and you just got to learn in the process. But sitting back and not doing anything right now is no longer acceptable.
okay,
So
so who are your workshops for?
honestly, my workshops right now are for yoga instructors and fitness instructors. That's who my main like yoga philosophy and social justice workshops are for. That's who my diversity and inclusion workshop is for. But the reality is these workshops can work for anybody. These concepts, these principles, this yoga philosophy, you don't have to practice yoga to practice these yoga philosophies, right? Like these are very basic, simple things. You know what I mean? Like the first the first one is like ahimsa, non-harming. I think that's very straightforward. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like it doesn't take a big, it doesn't take, it's not a large concept, it's not high concept. So are geared toward those in the yoga and fitness industry. And it's like I'm slowly branching out and doing other mindful work with like leaderships of corporations. But right now, my focus is like this yoga and fitness industry and really helping people understand how we're contributing to the overall issue.
Okay, so that's great. That's great because many of our followers are, yoga, Pilates bar, and other,
Yeah.
fitness
Yeah.
activities, and many of them have their own studios or they teach online, or many of them are instructors. So I think this would be,
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
so I have a workshop coming up on the 25th from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific. It's virtual, so it's via Zoom. If you are a yoga instructor, you do get Yoga Alliance continuing education credits for it. And it's going to be great. And like I said, we're really diving into yoga philosophy and social justice and how to be an ally and an accomplice and how to create your why statement as to why you want to be the change you wish to see in the world. Like that's a large part of it, and people really leave with tangible things that they can do, because
Okay.
I think that's a big thing too.
So let's do something. Could you please, after the talk, send us
Yeah.
all the information, and we
Yeah.
will promote it also on
Yeah.
our
Absolutely.
on our
Absolutely.
account, because this is part of, just being the change, right?
Yeah.
Start taking action into something very specific and kind of easy in the sense. It's like you have
Yeah.
already your clients, you have the people that listen
Mhm.
to you.
Yeah.
What is
Exactly.
your message that you're going to give them?
Yeah, and your family. It starts at home.
Family, friends. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so my next question is about motherhood.
Okay.
So you're a single mom, you have
Mhm.
your kid, and then that's something else, that brain change, right?
Yeah.
So how motherhood has transformed you?
I think motherhood has just, well, one, I've always wanted to be a mom. I think that's something like I do at a very young age. Not necessarily a wife, but I always knew I wanted to be a mom. So that's probably why I'm not married right now. But I think for me, it really allowed me to hone into my spirituality, and it really allowed me to tap into my intuition. When I had my son, it was not an ideal situation. Everybody was freaking out, despite the fact, I was 24. I had a master's degree. Like I was living on my own, doing all the things, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, like you're not married, you're gonna have a baby." And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And I think that was a moment, that was a turning point for me, because I am very much so a people pleaser and like just want people to be happy with me and whatever. But in that moment, what I realized is like sometimes you have to do what you know is right for your life and show people why it was right for your life, and then later they'll catch up, right? Because I ended up going back to school to get my second master's, and my son was 3 months old. And people were like, "Oh my God, that's crazy, yada, 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 whatever." And then when I finished, like a year and a half later or so, they're like, "Oh, we're so proud of you." And, but it just goes to like, you have to walk your own path. You can't allow people to project their own fears on you. You can't
Mm-hmm.
allow people to project their own life experiences on you, because you're different. And I feel like when you really tap into your higher power and have that connection, if you're going in the right direction or not. You know what I mean?
Right.
And motherhood has very much so led me down that path of like spiritual awakening, if you will.
Right. Yeah, that's very powerful, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, too. Yeah, motherhood, which was born, that
Yeah.
role at the same time of
Yeah.
being, the CEO of Tuckets.
Yeah.
Those two is what really has kind of made me evolve a lot.
Yeah. It forces you to grow. It forces you to grow up for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, so I have two more questions.
Okay.
And then one is, so we're talking about, Tuckets is related to faith, that food-brain connection. The fact that our toes are free to, to grasp, to
Yeah.
sense, even for instructor, to see how people feel through their toes, like
Yeah.
if someone is nervous or not feeling confident or
Yeah.
worry, like the toes will show. But what I have discovered is that most people don't like their toes or
Mhm.
their feet in general. Most
Mhm.
people actually leave them on the side,
Mhm.
There are not many people that focus their workouts on their
Yeah.
feet. Certain workouts help more than others, like
Yeah.
like if you do Pilates and or bar, like you are actively kind of using a bit more your toes, your feet. But
Mhm.
what's your own relationship with your feet? What is
Yeah.
that relationship you have with your own feet?
Yeah, no, it's actually so funny because I have flat feet. So I've actually struggled with my arch my entire life. And it's so funny because I don't like working out in shoes because the arches of shoes make my arches hurt, right? So my feet will like almost feel like they're on fire depending on what
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing in a workout if I have on shoes. But if I do it barefoot, it's fine. It's no problem. And I think it just goes back to the fact that, like, as humans, we were never intended to wear shoes. You know what I mean? And, like, I feel the most grounded and comfortable and, like, stable when I am bare feet, right? And even when I'm teaching, I teach a lot to the feet, especially, like, in balancing about how you need to press into your big toe. And, like, that's how you're going to stay grounded and connected and, like, really suction into the mat with your foot because that's your connection to the earth, right? That is your
Mm-hmm.
grounding force. And we don't talk a lot about how to really ground into the feet like dancers do. And dancers are great with like speaking to the feet and like how to really use your feet and develop those muscles. But for the rest of us, it takes a little more time for us to realize, like, oh my God, if I do X, Y, and Z with my foot, everything else will be better, you know? But I have to do a lot of work on my feet specifically. Like I roll out my arches all the time. Like I get pedicures regularly because my feet hurt a lot because of the fact that I have flat feet and I am so active. So I have to pay a lot of attention to my feet, just for the fact that I don't have arches. So it just makes some things a little more complicated than they have to be. But yeah, I prefer being barefoot than, more than that.
Yeah, I imagine. And then my last question is, it's very rare, like that whatever we do in life, and especially we succeed, we do it all on our own. There is always what I call angels, virtual mentors, people that help us
Mm-hmm.
one way or the other, or people that have been an inspiration. So, who has been an inspiration for you in this social justice and yoga journey?
Yeah, I mean, it it's so interesting because I just feel like more than I realize, I think that civil rights has been a part of who I am for a very long time, just because I grew up in Alabama. So people in my church were very politically active, very socially responsible. And I've always grown up seeing that as the example of what you do. Like you speak up when things are wrong. Um, and I think just in regards to the industry, there's this page called Black Girl Yoga. And that page for me was so eye-opening and enlightening because you don't see that many Black women doing yoga, even though a lot of Black women have been doing yoga for years, for as long as it's been in the US. And that page in itself is so, like I said, enlightening and eye-opening and just a beautiful experience because the whole page, the premise is like to showcase Black women across the US doing yoga. I also follow Hippie Heathen, who, if anybody follows her, she's an amazing, like, beautiful, like, chocolate skin. Like, she was a dancer, I think, and then transitioned into yoga. But her page to experience. And then recently, I've been into Peloton. So Day on Peloton, she in herself is just like a light and a fire that is so rare. And like her fitness journey has been long as well. But she just talks about how you make the choice, and like everything is about choices. And she's just a very empowering woman. She recently like cut off all her hair and like dyed it blonde. So She's amazing. Follow her if you don't follow her, guys. But yeah, so I mean, those are like the women that just like inspire me on a daily basis, and like the things that I'm doing in fitness and health. Um, because it's such a feat to show up in these spaces and be your full authentically black self, because people want you to not, right? Because by you being unapologetically black, it makes it evident how white certain spaces are. You know what I mean? So it's just amazing to see women like that online doing great things, showing up in so many spaces for themselves and other people. So yeah.
Yeah, this is. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. I will make sure to follow all of them.
Yes, follow them, follow them. They're so good.
Perfect. And then just a reminder for everyone. So if someone wants to take a workshop with you, where can they find you?
So I am Christa Janine everywhere. I'm Christa Janine on all social platforms, and then my website is christajaninefit.com.
Okay.
And if you go to my website, the link for the workshop next weekend is at the top of the page.
Okay, perfect. Christa, thank you so much for
Yes,
being with us
thank
today, for
you.
being so open, honest, vulnerable, and sharing, a bit of your
Yeah,
life with us, and also teaching us so much.
absolutely. Thank you for
I'm sure
having me.
this conversation is going to create a lot of impact. I send you a big hug, and then like
Thank
we
you.
Colombian, we are very huggy. We
Yeah, I am too. I love a good hug. I love a good hug.
well, we can give hugs again. So I'm
I
sending you
know.
a virtual hug. Thank you so much again for being with us,
Thank
and then
you.
I look forward to to stay connected.
Absolutely. Thank you so so much. And I will. I'll send you the post for the
Yeah,
workshop.
yeah, send it so we can also help you to
Awesome.
promote it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
All right, bye.
Bye.